Damaged Defenders by Sherza. Chapter 59. Sif. Sif had only ever been to Midgard the once, so she was rather startled when the Bifrost deposited them on top of a building taller than any in Asgard. Even the palace was not so tall. She would not have been amused to discover that her thoughts as regarded Midgard and its population were echoing those of Farbati on their brief visit to Midgard. Sif had no gift for healing. That fact had been part of why she'd sought the warrior path as a child. So she did not follow Queen Frigga when she went to attend the man the Avengers sought her aid with. She ended up prowling about what seemed to be the common gathering area for the Avengers, peering curiously at various items about the area and trying to divine their purpose. Some of it was fairly obvious. While Asgard didn't have weightlifting, per se, training to be able to lift sword, spear, and hammer for hours in battle did exist. Sif actually thought the heavy liftable equipment a rather clever means by which to train thus, even if she was rather confused because the only Avenger who carried an actual weapon was the man called Hawkeye. Clint Martin, hadn't it been? So far she knew. The entertainment area was equally easily identified, even if the precise means of entertainment baffled her. Seating arrangements gathered around something, usually a stage or convenient wide swath of flat ground, were common to all the realms. Likewise, the swimming areas. Contained swimming areas were unknown to Asgard, but Sif had seen such things on Vanaheim. The weaponless sparring area was equally easily identified. Sif thought the padded mats that lined the area a fine idea. Far too often, broken bones and other serious injuries had resulted from a sparring session due to landing on unforgiving stone and dirt. What use some things could be put to completely escaped her, however. Mostly, it was the gymnastics equipment that stymied her. She stood under the rings dangling down from the ceiling for a good 5 minutes, staring at them, trying to figure out what they were and why they were there. It was thus that the Black Widow came upon her. They're used to train agility and flexibility. Sif jolted and whirled around to face the unexpected voice, then relaxed when she identified the one called Black Widow. She glanced back up at the rings, then over at Natasha, that had been the name. Again, her confusion must have shown on her face. Perhaps a quick demonstration will make it clearer, Natasha said. Give me a few moments. I'm not dressed properly for exercise. And she disappeared into a door against one wall. Natasha came out a couple minutes later, dressed in the figure-hugging black outfit Sif remembered from the Avengers' visit to Asgard. She then proceeded to demonstrate the use of the equipment that had baffled Sif. It was rather eye-opening. And not just because training for agility and flexibility was all but unknown on Asgard, where strength was all. Sif had not doubted Thor when he claimed Natasha to be a warrior. She hadn't even really needed Thor's proclamation to know Natasha was a warrior. It was all over the way Natasha walked, the way she assessed her room, and everyone in it. But knowing Natasha could fight and seeing even a fraction of it firsthand were two entirely different things. So much of how Sif fought, she'd had to adapt from methods designed for the strength and stamina of an Asgardian man. Neither of which she could match, no matter how hard she tried. She really ought to emulated Loki and worked out a style that played to her strengths, but she'd been determined to be the ideal Asgardian warrior. The worst part, she now understood, having been doing a lot of thinking the past few weeks, of it was she had denied herself a chance to learn from the warrior woman of other realms because of it. No longer. At least not if Natasha was willing. Besides, it just might be fun testing herself against someone whose abilities were so at odds with her own. Even Loki, who had catered to his strengths in long-distance fighting, had become competent with sword and spear. Insofar as Sif knew, Midgardians did not use such implements in battle and had not for some time, at least compared to their own lifespans, if not in Asgardian terms. Would you be amenable to sparring? Sif asked. She blinked a bit at the toothy, predatory grin the question got her. That sounds like fun, Natasha said, then glanced up. Jarvis, warn us if the boys decide to show up. Of course, Agent Humanov, the odd-sounding voice that was the building's invisible servant, at least that what Sif understood Jarvis to be anyway, said. Why would you ask that? Sif wanted to know. Men are children, Natasha said. Watching two girls fight. Sif said, divining at least part of the problem. Yes, men were children, and she could see it where they would at the least be tempted to make stupid comments if they watched the two women spar. Though I had thought women fighting was more accepted here. More accepted, yes. Completely equal, no, Natasha said. And in this case, most of the men on the team are rather given to making stupid comments even under the best of conditions. Her tone was one of tolerant amusement rather than irritation or anger. Steve smirked. True enough of Prince Thor, she admitted, tone likewise amused. And of Fandral, another of Thor's usual companions on Asgard. I've lost track of the number of times I've had to thump one or both of them over the head for being idiots. The other two of our company are rarely a problem that way. Volstagg is a bit older than the rest of us, and his wife has educated him about such things. Hogan hardly speaks at all, never mind participating in idiot male pestering. The two women shared a look that women throughout the realms have exchanged when the menfolk of their lives are discussed. Sif then divested herself of her sword and armor, leaving her in a leather vest, used to pad the armor, a short-sleeved shirt, and leather trousers. After a moment's contemplation, she removed the vest as well, putting herself on more equal footing with Natasha where physical protection from attack was concerned. She could do nothing to negate the advantages being Asgardian gave her, unfortunately. The predatory look Natasha was giving her made Sif think her strength would not be too much of a concern in any case. They started slowly, circling each other, feinting, testing each other's reactions, and trying to discover any tells. Sif was disconcerted to discover that Natasha didn't seem to have tells at all. That said, Natasha's fighting style did remind Sif somewhat of Loki's, in that she was fast, agile, and not afraid to use it to its utmost. Your pardon, ladies, but most of the Avengers are headed to this floor, Jarvis said. Only Captain Rogers is not, and that, I think, is solely because he refuses to leave Sergeant Barnes' side. Sif traded an amused, exasperated, and knowing look with Natasha. Sure enough, less than 2 minutes later, and the entirety of the Avengers, save Captain Rogers, tumbled out of the elevator. Sif cocked her head slightly when she spotted two youths she didn't know among them. Stark? Barton? Natasha said, her tone one of warning. What? It's not like we've seen all that many Asgardians in action, now have we? Tony asked. Sif decided to give him points for trying. After all, it was true. They'd only seen Thor in battle. The gleam in Tony's eye, however, said there was a more puerile reason he'd shown up. She cocked her head at Natasha, who returned the look with another of those rather disconcertingly predatory grins. Sif blocked their audience out with the ease of long practice. Training sessions always tended to gather a crowd of observers in Asgard, especially when it had been their company training. With the two princes of the realm, a woman, and a Vanir, Hogan, in their company, they had always gathered a huge number of observers. Sif quickly discovered that Natasha was stronger than she had anticipated a female Midgardian to be. Sif wasn't sure if that was something unique to Natasha, if she had underestimated Midgardian strength, or if it was just a product of Natasha's training as a warrior. Natasha still didn't have the brute strength even female Asgardians possessed, but she was a lot closer to it than Sif had dared hope. Natasha actually succeeded in raising bruises with her strikes. Sif had just started to really get into the rhythm of their sparring when Natasha did something that ended with Sif on her back on the floor, staring at the ceiling in confusion. The watching Avengers were all cheering Natasha's victory. Sif sat up after a moment. What was that you did? Sif wanted to know. She'd not really caught much of it, other than it had involved Natasha flinging herself at Sif legs first. It's a move designed to use a bigger opponent's weight and center of balance against them, Natasha said. I've brought down men Thor's size with it more times than I can count. Would you be willing... Sif started. Natasha grinned at her, a more friendly and less predatory version than the earlier versions. Thor, get over here. You'll suffer least for getting thrown on your back a lot. And as long as I'm showing Sif this move... Rogue, Darcy, front and center. They got a lot of laughter from the watching group, even from Thor, who gamely joined them on the mats. The female youth and the woman Sif had heard had felled one of the palace guards came forward, stopping just shy of the mats to watch from a better vantage point. Natasha grinned at them. This move is simple enough. You really don't even need that much momentum to pull it off. You just grab your target around the neck and or head with your legs and swing your weight around, aiming for the ground. The target will go down, if only to avoid getting their neck snapped, which can be done with this move if you know what you're doing, but the basic version just threatens that. And since no one wants their neck snapped, they're not going to fight the momentum and risk it. Sif nodded. Even Asgardians avoided that eventuality. Not even their healers could fix a broken neck, which as often as not resulted in death. Breaks lower down in the spine could be fixed, but necks, not so much. She watched as Natasha demonstrated the move, moving more slowly than she had when she'd pulled it on Sif. Even bracing and expecting it, Thor did indeed go down, laughing as he sat up. It took Sif a few tries to get the move right, but she did get it. Thor was a good sport about the whole thing. He even let Darcy attempt to learn the move with him as her target. Darcy whooped and bounced for a good 10 minutes after she'd successfully brought Thor down. Rogue, however, refused to attempt it. Sif wasn't sure why, but no one tried to push her. After that, the Avengers adjourned to the entertainment area. Sif, mindful of her decision to at least try to apologize to Loki, angled towards him as the others, laughing and talking, took their places. Sif knew better than to think Loki would forgive her stupidity. Loki was not given to forgiveness or forgetting. That said, apologizing would seriously reduce the amount of pranks aimed at her once Loki returned to Asgard. Well, Sif assumed he would return there eventually. Someday. Perhaps not for as much as a millennium, but given the length of their lives, he'd return eventually. Prince Loki? Loki shot her a look. Yes, Lady Sif. His tone was cold and remote. Sif flinched mentally, but forged on. I owe you an apology, she said. She sighed. In truth, I owe you many, more than most. I, of all, should have... She sighed again. Should have been on your side. After all, there was little difference between us. A woman daring to be a warrior and a man who chose non-traditional pursuits. She settled down, given that Loki's differences were not easily summed up in a word or two otherwise. Had I not been so blind, so eager to be the perfect Asgardian warrior... She shrugged. Well, that lay at the root of the problems between us. All she'd ever been able to see was that Loki refused to do the right thing by being a true Asgardian warrior. She'd taken it as a personal affront that he opted for non-traditional weaponry. She'd taken his interest in magic as an outright insult aimed at her. Magic was, after all, traditionally a female pursuit. Loki's interest in and easy mastery of magic and, well, not gone over well. She'd felt like he was saying, see? Magic is so easy, even a man can do it. Yet, here you are, completely incompetent at even the most basic principles of magic, and you call yourself a woman. Far too late for it to do any good, she finally realized that wasn't what Loki had been doing. Loki regarded her for a long moment, then eventually nodded, before walking away from her. Well, that had gone better than she dared hope. She'd half expected him to yell at her or pull some magical prank on her. After a few moments, she joined the Avengers, curious to see what sort of entertainment could be had when staring at a blank section of wall.